Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Propeller Club of Northern California. I'm Stas Margaronis, and we are welcoming Peter Friedman, Executive Director, Agriculture Transportation Coalition, who was not very well this last week, but has come back from his illness to be with us because he loves us so much that he just couldn't stay away.
That's true.
And so I want to begin by, of course, not only welcoming you, but doing the introductions that we do. Ron Brown from the Port of Oakland will be doing an introduction of Peter. Ron has a little bit of good news for us in terms of how the Port of Oakland's been doing, and I will ask him to share that when it's his turn to chat. I will start the introductions with Todd Crawshaw. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, welcome. I'm Todd Crawshaw, Crawshaw Design. We provide integrated brand marketing for print and web, premier web hosting, and IT support. I have a crying cat in the background, so I'll mute myself.
Hungry.
And Ron Brown, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm very happy to. Ron Brown with the Port of Oakland and the Maritime Division. I think I'm the second longest standing member on the Propeller Club board behind Nick Maroney.
I think that is correct, and it isn't me. So thank you very much for your longevity, Brother Brown, and we appreciate all of your good works. Now, just real quickly, we had a little bit of good news from the Port of Oakland, according to some of our export figures. Could you share that with us?
Well, I was sharing earlier that, in terms of the ag commodities, the port actually has done very well through 2022. Of course, it was a bumpy year, but, as we look at some of our primary commodities, almonds, of course, is one of the largest by value and by volume. Those numbers were up. Walnut numbers were pretty substantial. Beef and poultry was pretty substantial. So although we saw it as a bumpy year, the outcome wasn't so bad in terms of our ag exporters, and we're certainly happy for that and thankful of them. So I have a printout that I'll make available to the Propeller Club that people can go onto the website and download and see that information.
Thank you very much, Ron. Peter Friedman, good morning. Would you like to say hello?
How's everybody? And in terms of that illness, I don't want anybody to get too worried about it. It was COVID. It still is COVID. And actually, you're all in California, most of you. So I just want to say I brought the COVID from Sacramento home and gave it to my wife. And we've been enjoying COVID together. But it started in Sacramento. Probably another thing that Savannah is going to criticize California for is giving people COVID, but that's not fair. And I'm feeling better.
Thank you very much, Peter. Captain Ann McIntyre. Captain, good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody. And Peter, nice to see you again. It's been a while since I've seen you, and I'm looking forward to your presentation today. I am just back from Monterey with some not great news. I mean, not so much supply chain, but maritime related, is that last night the city of Monterey had a city council meeting where they passed a resolution that the city of Monterey was no longer going to process cruise ship passengers in and out of the city of Monterey. And so it's not a ban on cruise ships, but the city is no longer going to support the berthing of the passenger vessel launches or the administration work used with bringing the tourists in and out of the city. So there was a lot of opposition from the local businesses, of course, and also a lot of concern for the city and the Monterey Bay Sanctuary and the environment, etc. bottom line was that they felt the risk of a potential discharge incident with a cruise ship didn't offset the economic gains that the community got from the ships. And they also felt, and this was really unfortunate to hear, that the cruise ships did not represent the values of their community. So not sure where that'll go. So we're anticipating that there will not be a spring 2023 cruise ship season in Monterey, which is unfortunate.
Unfortunate. Well, thank you very much for that update, Captain. John Carlier, good morning.
Good morning, Stas. Thanks for hosting. John Carlier, board agent with the San Francisco Bar Pilots.
Thank you, John. Brandon McDonald. Brandon, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you.
Brandon, you want to tell everybody who you are?
Oh, gosh. Brandon McDonald, PCC Logistics, West Coast Warehousing, Trucking, Transloader, 3PL, and a huge fan of Stas and Peter Friedman.
Thank you very much, Brandon. I appreciate that. Okay, I know this is somebody from Storm Geo, but I forget who C. Rive is. Who is that? He's blank over there. I see it. I see a
Oh,
box.
you know who it is? I know him well. He's a great guy. Connor Rive from the Port of Redwood City.
Oh, very good. Thank you for that. Ellen,
Yes.
good morning.
Maybe he'll chime in later. Hi.
Okay. Well, Ellen, since you happen to be here, would you introduce yourself?
I have to butt in here. I'm just thrilled to be here today to see you all and to greet Peter as well. Peter and I have known each other from our days in Washington, D.C. and making sure the transportation, the maritime transportation industry in San Francisco Bay and coastal California is continuing to thrive despite Anne's sad news about the cruise cargo in Monterey. But I think many of you know I'm an environmental consultant, making sure the ports and maritime industry up and down the state and coastline get permitted and with environmental gold stars. So got a lot of work and doing a lot of work right now for the ferry system in the Bay. So excited about that. And the bar pilots too, keeping them strong. So, and you all. Great to be here. Thanks.
And Anne, you keep us honest, so we appreciate that too. No comment, I see. Okay. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you
Nice
very
hat,
much.
Brandon.
I'm sorry.
Did you take a look at Brandon?
Oh my goodness! My goodness, Brandon. Is he getting
Brandon's the man.
is he getting a commission for this?
No, are you kidding? He paid a lot of extra money for that. Those hats don't go free.
Oh my goodness.
You gotta be a especially deserving individual to get one of those.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Brandon, well done there. You get, I guess your AGTC dues just went up, if I understood that correctly.
No, on the contrary.
Darren Shems. Darren, good morning.
Darren Shems of Storm Geo. I'm one of the senior route analysts and also the internal audit leader for Storm Geo globally. And Stas, you asked me last time in January how we were looking for weather in PAC. And at the time, we were dealing with a lot of speed adjustments coming out of English Channel. So that was taking the brunt of it. But boy, the next week, like I was saying, it was going to kick off. It kicked off. And access to the bearing, timing-wise, real tricky still to this day. Windows are short. Quick succession of Central Ocean storms going up, tracking northeast to Gulf of Alaska. And now we're getting the freezing spray, structural icing concerns off the Kurils, West Ocean. So it's definitely going for PAC now. So a lot of case-by-case analysis in case you were curious how that's going.
So have things slowed down now that the weather's gone?
Well, no, I mean, it's certainly still busy season for us, but I guess you could say sometimes it's so bad that it's easy because you don't want to make a decision where you don't have contingency options. should something happen to get in a bad situation, right? So if you're not looking to see a good window, getting through Unimac Pass, getting up to the bearing for westbound, might not take that risk and go for a southern option. So, you know, it's transition seasons are actually more tricky that way.
And not a lot of fun if you happen to be on the bridge watching all of the fun unfold in front of you, right?
Certainly not. So it falls upon us. Keep these guys in good shape out there.
Well, thank you very much for that update, Darren. Dave Arsenault, good morning, sir.
Well, good morning, Stas. My name is Dave Arsenault. I'm with GSC Enterprises here based out of Oakland. And Stas, we appreciate the invitation. Of course, I serve on the Propeller Club of LA Long Beach, your brothers and sisters to the south, but also work closely up in the Pacific Northwest with Candy and the team up there. But certainly, look, it's great to see you again. And Peter, we've got a long history together in the past, and it's great to see you. I'm glad that you're feeling better, and certainly looking forward to hearing your presentation here today.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Dave, thank you very much. Dennis Dysinger. Dennis, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Stats. Dennis Dysinger, Maritime and Logistics Management. Hung up my shingle last year as an independent consultant and been kind of doing that for the last 6-8 months. And thanks for hosting.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, Dennis. Evie Wong, I'm glad you could make it. Evie, you're on mute.
Hi, Stas. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having this. And I am with Alba Wheels Up. I am now former president of CB Fank, and John Lee is our new president, glad to say. And I am also a proud member of Propeller Club. I wanted to let all know that freshly back from a very successful Pacific Coast Council mission to DC. And Peter, of course, was missing in action due to his COVID status, but we missed him. We had a great mission where we meet with customs and other agencies. Other members met with FMC, great meetings there. We really had wonderful engagement with FMC, and lately they are just in this activism push and very, very great dialogue. And then Tuesday we meet the legislators at the Hill, and I'm pleased to say we had really, really great engagement with Garamendi's office. Of course, many of you might know that he and Congressman Johnson had the OSRA passed last year. Of course, a lot of things still going on, being implemented, and Peter is working with them on some more reform measures and all that, and hope to hear more updates on that. But in general, Garamendi is really, really engaged, and I was just wowed by how engaged they are with getting solutions for us, and look forward to Peter expanding on what has been done so far since last year.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Evie. Thank you for that update. Kevin Policarpo. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Sauce, and good morning to everyone else. My name is Kevin Policarpo, and I help Mr. Margaronis as his research assistant.
Thank you very much, and you do an excellent job, Kevin. Thank you.
I try.
Matthew LaFiandra, good morning.
Good morning, neighbor. Matthew LaFiandra, CEO of Ocean Solutions. We are a broker of forward freight agreements to hedge ocean freight, as well as a physical broker of oil products and agricultural products. Very excited to hear Mr. Friedman and try to apply some of his knowledge to the inflows of urea and ammonia to the U.S. West Coast.
And that's something that is a valuable commodity for us. Matthew, thank you very much. Mike Swan. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, and Mike Swan. I'm from Storm Geo. This is actually my second time I've been to this, and I'm out of Connecticut, and I work out of the EOV department, and I've been focusing over the past 6 months on the changing in charter parties and Divine Gate, changing things up and how currents are applied to our analysis reports, and and also we're starting to dive into how the emissions are changing over time with the CII ratings, and it's been a pretty exciting few months. So.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. And Mike and Darren, we always appreciate the contributions and support of Storm Geo. And I see on my radar screen here, Greg Feeney. Greg, good morning. Greg, are you there? Yes.
I'm here now. Hey, good morning, Greg Feeney. I'm a Propeller Club member as well as on the board, and also I represent Port Transfer Incorporated right here in the overweight quarter. My neighbor is PCC Logistics. We specialize in a lot of ag products, bulk, and also we do a lot of overweight adjustments for customers that I tell people I take their pain away when it comes to overweight challenges. So that's about it. I'm looking forward to hearing what Peter has to say, and I'll spread the good news among our cohorts here at Port Transfer and High Mountain and Manise Brothers, our hay division. So thank you.
Greg, thank you very much. Scott Taylor. Good morning, Mr. Taylor.
Hey, good morning, Stas. Thanks for hosting. I'll keep my name is Scott Taylor. I'm the CEO and chairman of the board of GSC Enterprises based in Oakland and soon to be on the East Coast and certain international gateways. But I will keep my comments brief because I want to hear what the Honorable Peter Friedman has to say, also known as the source of all knowledge.
Yeah,
we're all going to learn something here very quickly. Thank you very much.
How come nobody I've ever lived with has ever thought that was the case?
We don't know that. We can't answer that question for you.
Yeah.
It goes back to Jesus and a prophet without honor in his own country. So what can I tell you? But we do appreciate this. Now, Scott, before you go, we have had some changes coming out of the California Air Resources Board about truck emissions. Could you share that with us just real quickly?
Well, as everybody knows, the truck and bus rule went into effect January 1st of this year. So there was a dramatic reduction in drivers that were available. However, volumes are down on the West Coast. So it was very interesting that hit at the same time, and we haven't felt any real, I would say, driver shortage in California at this time. However, coming up January 1st of 2024, the wonderful state of California will institute their new policy, ACF, the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, which means that you can't add a new truck into the California market unless it's zero emissions, which only costs about $400,000 or $500,000. And also, by the way, they're not available. And if they were available, there's not an infrastructure to charge a zero emission truck. So more to come on that subject, I'm sure.
Very good. Okay. There are new clean truck rules as of January 1st, right?
Correct. That's the truck and bus rule that went into effect the 1st of this year.
Okay. And are they being enforced at the Port of LA and Long Beach?
They're being enforced throughout the ports in California. Absolutely.
Okay. Very good. Scott, thank you very much for that update. And we appreciate it and hope that the year goes well for you.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks for not asking me about Howard Terminal.
Oh, now, as a matter of fact, Peter Friedman asked about Howard Terminal. Well, wait a minute. We are a free-flowing organization here. Let's do this. Peter is going to ask about how things are going, and maybe you could share at that point.
Well, let's do that. Let's hear from Peter.
Okay. Now I see Tori Presti here. Tori, good morning. Tori, are you there? I'm going to go to Robert Wilkins. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Sorry I'm late, but I'm glad to be here.
Robert, would you introduce yourself?
I'm Robert Wilkins. I'm the Executive Director of the International Maritime Center and Chief Program Officer for Seafarers Ministry of the Golden Gate.
Very good. And you made an excellent presentation at the PCNC board meeting a couple of weeks ago, for which we are very grateful. And I hope that some of the challenges that you have with seafarers and being able to get them off the ship go someplace. That is a challenge for you. So thank you very much for all of your good work.
Thank you.
Tori, are you back out there? Okay. On that note, we are going to begin our program. I want to say just one quick thing. First of all, we're very grateful for Peter to be here because he has not been well. But we are very grateful to Peter because he is one of the few people that has managed to get Democrats and Republicans together to help pass that Ocean Shipping Reform Act, and his leadership and the leadership of the AGTC played a critical role in making that happen. And that has resulted in a number of really important and necessary changes. So Peter, congratulations for all of your good work. If you can get Republicans and Democrats together, maybe there's hope for the rest of us. On that note, I'm going to ask Ron Brown to do the formal introduction. Mr. Ron, good morning again, and thank you.
And keep it brief. Brief, Ron, brief.
You're on mute, Ron. Ron?
All right. Thank you, Stas. And thank you, Peter. For those of you that don't know Peter Friedman led the formation of the Agriculture Transportation Coalition when a number of agriculture exporters sought assistance in dealing with transportation challenges. The AGTC is now the voice of a broad cross-section of U.S. agriculture exporters, importers, and their service providers who require competitive ocean, rail, and truck transportation services in order to maintain and grow foreign market share. The Journal of Commerce has declared the AGTC as the principal voice of U.S. agriculture exporters in transportation policy. Members include not only agriculture exporters and importers, but also agriculture trade associations and state commodity commissions. As Executive Director of the AGTC, Peter annually conducts ag shipper workshops all around the country and is a frequent speaker. Yes, sir.
This is great. This is enough. We don't want people to get annoyed and sign off.
No.
That's great. We don't need any more.
I decided not to use any of the interesting stories that I know, Peter. So
Good.
let me finish.
How about those stories?
Let me finish up, and then you'll have the mic.
All right.
All right. Peter is a native of Seattle and graduate of the University of Washington Law School. He served as counsel for the United States Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, where he drafted the Ocean Shipping Act and the Harbor Maintenance Fee Trust Fund for port dredging and other transportation legislations. So with that, Mr. Friedman, you have the mic.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Ron. Thanks for being a big supporter and friend for a long time. You're right. It's been a while. And it was great being with you and 90 agriculture exporters and importers and truckers in Sacramento about a week and a half ago. Very productive with the senior management of MSC. which followed by a day our similar sized gathering of 90 plus in Portland, Oregon, with MSC, including official from Geneva, as well as the top people in Pacific Northwest. So it's an indication of how important they're considering agriculture, exports, imports, truckers, and the whole trade community, including everybody that I see here on here. And it's great to see people who are active members of the AGTC for a long time. Thank you all. And it struck me that what happened last couple weeks is something that we're all going to remember, everybody on this call and so forth, going to remember for a long time, because it's sort of pivotal. This is the breakup of alliances. This is the establishment of a new order. This is, for the first time, MSC, the largest carrier in the world. And who 10 years ago would have thought, even 10 years ago? That was Maersk, and that was going to always be Maersk and so forth. And Maersk has grown over the years through acquisitions, P&O Lines, Sealand, Hamburg Süd, and others. And MSC never acquired. They grew organically. But now there's a real separation between one carrier, which is MSC, and all the rest in terms of their vessel capacity. But that's alone not the most determinative factor of where the changes are coming. The other big carrier, Maersk, which has been the giant for decades now, is pivoting to another approach. And how many other ocean carriers are going to pivot to this other approach? And that approach involves doing your jobs, taking EVs, customs brokerage, and freight forwarding clients, taking the trucking role, taking the warehousing role. Very interesting what's happening, what Maersk is planning to do. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but the vertical integration is something they're pursuing now aggressively, and it's the cause of the separation, if you will, between MSC and Maersk. And I think it's something everybody needs to pay attention to, because what we do know about the ocean carrier industry that we've known for a long time, they like to follow the leader. And the question is, who's the leader now? The leader's always been Maersk. Whatever any Maersk did, the other carriers would figure that's creative, that's what they're going to do. And I'm sure the justification in many boardrooms for doing anything was, well, Maersk is doing it. But maybe things have changed now. Is it what Maersk is doing, or is it what MSC is doing? MSC is not interested in performing these other services, these end-to-end services. They're interested in running ships. Now, here you are in Northern California, and we can see the results of that already. This last year, when almonds needed to get out and other products needed to get out from Northern California or from the West Coast to the Mediterranean, to Europe, there were two options: Hapag-Lloyd, right? And MSC. Hapag-Lloyd decided they're not going to be in that business anymore. They made a business decision. They're not going to run that route. So that left one carrier, MSC, which has the number of vessels and the desire to run vessels everywhere. So now there is one carrier that is moving in that route. Now, some people complain, well, my God, the moment that happened, MSC increased their rates by $2,000. But, my response was, yeah, at least MSC stayed in the business and running vessels in that route that other carriers had abandoned. So I think that's all going to have some impacts down the road. We're not sure exactly how it'll all play out. We're not sure, but there is a lot of discussion of other alliances kind of reformulating, if not breaking up, just reformulating, reorganizing. Questions, what's going to happen with Costco and its collection of carriers? you know, there's a lot of change. And I think we're going to remember the beginning of 2023 as a time when the organization of the world's maritime industry, the whole structure, began to change in probably pretty important ways, in ways that will impact each component of the industry. If you're a trucker, if you're a freight forwarder, customs broker, warehouse, you know, who's going to own those? Is it going to be vertically integrated? Will you have access to the customers you currently have access to, the shippers? Or will you be a service provider only under contract to an ocean carrier, if that? So, you know, big changes there. I think the other thing that we're going to be talking a little bit about is still infrastructure. And what's remarkable is that we have had infrastructure challenges on the West Coast, capacity problems on the West Coast. And globally now, we know that ocean carriers in boardrooms around the world look at the US West Coast ports as capacity constrained. You know, there wasn't enough capacity. Now, frankly, there wasn't enough capacity in the Gulf and in the East Coast, but there's more capacity being added there. So what are we going to do about that on the West Coast? Because for many folks who want to continue shipping through the West Coast ports because the desired market, the best market, the most profitable market, the most accessible market for our U.S. exports for agriculture and forest products continues to be Asia Pacific. And there's a lot of valuable cargo that comes from the West that maybe isn't sufficiently highly valued to justify draying, although unless Brandon and Scott and Dave are thinking of maybe dramatically reducing their rates, but draying to Savannah. You're not taking almonds and trucking them to Savannah. You're certainly not going to take a hay forage from California all the way to the East Coast or the Gulf Coast. Those things need to go off West Coast ports. And if we don't have the capacity to handle the ships, and we don't have the recognition by ocean carriers that they need to put the ships into service to serve the West Coast ports, then we're in trouble. And we all know that an ocean carrier does not put capacity in service, does not put a vessel in service. No matter how much they say they love exports, they don't put a vessel in service. And people like Dave, who's run a steamship line here and so forth, definitely know it. Those ships go into service to carry the import cargo in, the higher valued, higher rated, higher revenue freight cargo coming in. And then if there's capacity, they'll take the exports out. But just hay and just almonds and just cotton are not going to induce a vessel in by itself. Now, we had actually an excellent, somewhat temporary, but excellent experience at Oakland in inducing additional service in. And some people here, including Scott and so forth, were very much involved in this effort when we had meat protein exporters from the Midwest who loved to go through Oakland and the cold storage in Oakland and go out. They wanted additional service from ONE. Well, we got Jeremy Nixon, chairman of ONE, on the phone. We talked to him. He perfectly understood that Tyson and JBS and these giant meat exporters wanted to use his service if he would put additional service in. But the key, and this is what Scott was involved in and others as well, was to get importers, some of the Northern California or Central Valley importers, to put some of their muscle into it, because without that import cargo and their commitment to bring that import cargo through that new service wouldn't have happened. Now, that's what we're up against on the West Coast. If the importers are looking to Savannah and Charleston and so forth, and not to the US West Coast ports, and the ocean carriers are going to serve them to those ports, we're going to be lacking the service that we need, the capacity we need. And as somebody mentioned, I think it was Scott already mentioned, we've got reduced volumes now. So we got a little breather, not only in the West Coast, Gulf, East Coast, so forth, a little bit of a breather, but we need the infrastructure. Now, we had something come up in Seattle that reminded me of Howard Terminal. In Seattle, there's an excellent terminal, container terminal. It's in use now. The Coast Guard has its polar icebreakers tied up near there. The Coast Guard needs some parking lots for some of the Coast Guard civilian commuters who are driving into work every day. And their bright idea was use that terminal, part of it anyway, as a parking lot for commuters. So this was an interesting call I got from the ILWU. Can we work together with the agriculture community and others to convince the Coast Guard, and as well as members of Congress and the senators, that the Coast Guard needs to park their commuters' cars somewhere else, not on an operating container terminal? So what does that sound like? It sounds like some people coming up with a different priority for what is an all too rare asset on the West Coast, and that, or anywhere in the country, but certainly on the West Coast, and that is a container terminal. So that, unlike Howard, that's a very big, vibrant container terminal right now. And right now they don't need all of it, but there's always a future. And we're hoping for growth in cargo moving in and out of our ports. So I think we have our work cut out for us. All of us on this call have our work cut out to convince politicians that cargo is important, that freight capacity is vital. And even though it's silent and doesn't drive cars to work and so forth, or go to baseball games or play baseball, it's somewhat less visible. It's out of sight, out of mind, usually freight, but we've got to work together. Somebody has to stand up for the freight and the freight capacity. So I think that's really critical, and people ought to be thinking how we do that going forward. We have a few interesting developments now, and I think the Federal Maritime Commission is a little bit like a 1965 Oldsmobile. It doesn't start super fast, and it certainly doesn't, it's not fast off the line. It's big and it's heavy and it doesn't steer all that well, but you know what? Starts going down the freeway, and pretty soon you get it up to 75 miles an hour and it won't stop. It just keeps on going. It can't be stopped. And I think what we're seeing with the Federal Maritime Commission, it's taken a little bit. It took the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, but the FMC now has got staff, not staffs. They have plenty of staff to actually be aggressive in implementation of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. And in fact, they already see, as Evie reported, that the sponsors of OSRA have got another bill ready to go. They're going to expand it even further. We're working with them on it. It's got three of the FMC commissioners already endorsing the major provision of that new legislation. So the commission is all in here and moving forward. Now, something just happened earlier this week, could be pivotal to anybody who ever uses a chassis, which I think is everybody here, and certainly to the truckers. The box rules, which is the requirement by an ocean carrier that only a chassis of the brand, of its designated brand, may be used to carry its container. has created such havoc, chassis shortages throughout the country, not only at the port and certainly in Oakland, but all across the country and at rail yards in Memphis and Kansas and Chicago, created shortages because this exclusive use requirement meant that if you did not have, for example, if it was America DCLI chassis, that container goes to the ground. The trucker has to drive around and find a DCLI chassis if there is one. And they have had instances in Memphis where they couldn't find one for a week and the container goes to the ground, where the trucker has its own, I'm sorry here. The trucker has its own chassis. You would think that if there are not enough DCLI chassis, that the truckers should be able to bring their own chassis in. But that hasn't been the case. And so the American Trucking Association brought a major suit, $1.some billion. It's named all the chassis providers and the ocean carriers who have these exclusive arrangements, which all of them do. And just this week, the administrative law judge came to a conclusion, which frankly, I'm glad they did, but she did, but I was surprised, frankly, because the commission does not have a history of actually doing anything that the ocean carriers didn't prefer. She has essentially ruled that these exclusive arrangements cannot be mandated for merchant haulage. Now, if an ocean carrier wants to have its own arrangement with an exporter for an all-in store door delivery, they can, reach whatever agreement they want with that chassis provider, use whatever chassis provider. But under this opinion, and it's still subject to appeal, under this, the trucker for merchant haulage, which is about 60% of the containers are moved, it is the merchant, the BCO, that has to make arrangements and determine which trucker they're going to use and so forth. On those, the ocean carrier cannot mandate a particular chassis. And that, I think, is going to free things up dramatically. The argument made by the truckers is that the truckers and the BCOs have been subsidizing the ocean carrier chassis cost because the ocean carriers have contracts with their particular chassis provider, DCLI, Track, Flexi, and they get their chassis for a certain price, and then the chassis provider can charge whatever it wants to the trucker for the merchant haulage. And the general view is, and there's going to be some more data provided, that truckers and BCOs, when they have to get the chassis, are paying substantially more for the use of that chassis than the ocean carrier does for its all-in delivery. And then the question is, do they pass those savings on to anybody? And is it passed on to, say, a Champion account, Walmart? And if that's the case, does that create discriminatory pricing? Walmart getting a much better deal or free chassis versus everybody else? And people are obviously sensitive to this, and the truckers are as well. The carriers said years ago they wanted to get out of the chassis business, but they did not. So this is going to really determine a lot of what's on the minds of the ocean carriers for the next year. There's going to be appeals. It's going to be the #1 issue before the Federal Maritime Commission and in the boardrooms of BCOs, because there are billions of dollars at stake with this. So my hope is that by opening it up and eliminating the exclusivity, all chassis can be used. And so when some chassis is not available, you could go get another chassis, another brand, or the trucker can bring their own chassis in. Right now, where the containers are in the rail yards in Chicago and Memphis, those rail yards do not allow the trucker to bring their own chassis in. And so containers sit on the ground for a long time, in some cases weeks, until the right chassis is found and the right trucker brings the right chassis under the right contract with the right ocean carrier. And that has just gummed things up tremendously. This may not be as immediately apparent to everybody right now because there's less congestion, less volume moving through the ports. But believe me, this is the biggest issue in the boardrooms of the ocean carriers right now. We do have some other developments here that I think are pretty interesting. The Federal Maritime Commission briefly asked for comments about whether they should implement some provisions in an Ocean Shipping Reform Act about ocean carriers' unreasonable refusal to deal, and particularly with focus of carrying exports. And they kind of let it sit there. They kind of took the comments and didn't do anything. Now they've opened it up again. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to prove it. I'd be interested in your thoughts. How do you prove that somebody is unreasonably refused to deal? And is that a problem right now? And here's the situation for all of us here. These issues were major crisis, major problem 2 years ago, year and a half ago. But now we have less volume, don't we? So we don't have nearly the crisis we did before. But it'll come back. Volumes will come back. Volumes come back from the East Coast to the West Coast, and global economy will pick up. And there, where will we be? And I think we're going to see now the FMC trying to put rules in place in advance of, in anticipation of when things get clogged again. So that's one. I don't know how many of you, if any, have been submitting charge complaints for demurrage and detention charges that were unreasonable. The FMC is moving forward with that quickly. And here is the interesting, outstanding issue. The FMC's detention demurrage rule said that the ocean carriers have to provide the bill within 30 days of the actual detention demurrage event. 2, they have to list what it's for. They can't just give you some dollar amount. There are 21 actual information points that have to be on every demurrage and detention invoice. But the third one is becoming quite controversial. That's the one that says that the ocean carrier can only impose detention demurrage on the contracted party, the transportation party. That is the BCO, the importer, the exporter. What about a trucker? What about a freight forwarder? What about a customs broker? None of you have a direct contractual relationship with the ocean carrier. And so the view is, or frankly, the terminal operators as well. But the ocean carriers have been dumping demurrage and detention charges on truckers and having the leverage to collect or lock out. The commission has said, no, you can't do that anymore under this rule. The shipper community the ocean carriers, of course, opposed that, but the ocean carriers have opposed everything relating to detention, demurrage, ocean shipping reform, everything. The ocean carriers have never admitted there was any issue or problem anyway. So why was any of this needed? I think that was a mistake. I think if you're a player in a field, you ought to play and maybe come up with some solutions, but they didn't. So nonetheless, here we are with a rule that's just about to be made final. But for this one issue. Should ocean carriers be prohibited from invoicing truckers for detention demurrage? Should they be required to invoice the importer or exporter with whom they have the transportation contract? Just about everybody, shippers wise, agreed with the FMC rule. No, just the importer exporter, the BCO, the consignee maybe, not the trucker. The National Retail Federation and Knit League have both said that they believe that the trucker should be the one invoiced for demurrage. That not only should it be also possible, but it should be the trucker that gets invoiced by the ocean carrier for demurrage. To me, that's puzzling that they took that position, but they're adamant about that. And the question is, what's FMC going to do about it? And I'd be interested from some of our truckers what you think about it. The AGTC comments were in support of the FMC's proposed rule that the detention demurrage charges have to go to the contracted party, the party that benefits from the transportation of its cargo. We did suggest perhaps that the importer exporter could designate some third party to do the processing, to receive the invoices, to process invoices, to pay them, you know, whatever arrangement that BCO might have with that third party, which could be a customs broker, freight forwarder, trucker, or real estate agent, who cares? It could be anybody, but it would have to be under the agreement, the express written agreement by that trucker or others to receive those and to process them, and B, under no circumstance would the trucker be liable for the payment. If the trucker could process it as a service, maybe that's okay. But to be held liable and thus locked out for failure to get that thing paid, that would be prohibited. So I'd be interested in what you think about that, because that's live and coming soon. And so maybe with that, I'll stop because we have some truckers and that's a live issue, and I'd be interested in what people think about that. That's very much in front of the commission now.
Peter, thank you very much for this. You've given us a whole lot to address here, and we're going to run out of time, so I want to try and get us in. One quick question before I'd like to get the trucker issue up front, but one of our concerns is the ILWU PMA talks. And this concern that the agreement is now, some people are saying we might not see an agreement until the summer. And the longer that this stretches out, the more you're having to take hay and almonds to Charleston and Savannah might become a reality if people are trying to export. Are we seeing a repeat of 2014, 2015, and could it have some long-term negative impacts on our West Coast ports?
While not as blatant as 8-10 years ago, the shutdown of terminals, we're not completely shut down on the West Coast. There's nothing as dramatic. I believe it's worse. I believe it's worse because it's a drip, drip, drip. And what happens, first of all, I disagreed with the Journal of Commerce and others who wrote these hair on fire articles, editorials last June. There's no contract. The contract isn't being renewed. That means the West Coast is going to be shut down. It's going to be strike. There's going to be lockout. And I never sensed from speaking with Willie Adams or any of the ILWU leadership or the PMA leadership, the terminal operators, that anybody wanted to shut down anything. But what's happening is there's this uncertainty, drip, drip, drip. And over a long course of time, we would be better off. It would have been something dramatic for 3 months. and solved. Because with this thing lasting on and on, major permanent decisions are being made that are irreversible, and those are real estate decisions. Where should a warehouse be built? Where should cold storage facilities be built? Where should transload facilities be built? West Coast or East Coast? And I do know of some decisions, particularly on transload, where some major companies are building transload at the East Coast, which they had previously considered should be built at various locations on the West Coast. Because as this thing goes on and on, those sorts of decisions, people need to make the decisions. They need to get the investment. They've got the money raised. They've got to put it in the ground. They've got very eager ports and state governments over there that are very pro-business, let's put it that way. And so they say, okay, at the boardroom in Chicago, the boardroom in Kansas City, they make that decision to go Norfolk, for example, rather than Oakland for a particular facility, because they don't want to wait. They got decisions to make. And once that decision's made, and once that's where the transload facility is, well, then you're stuck with that for a long time. And that's what I think is disconcerting. I've talked to the extent that they'll listen to those parties I just mentioned. You know, you can say, well, we still got automation issues, and we still got this issue, and we still got machinist union versus ILWU issues. But you know what? In the boardrooms in Kansas City, they've run out of patience, and they're putting the hard assets, their money, into the ground in ways that don't get easily reversed. I'm very concerned about it.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. Scott, you're an obvious person to talk about the impact to the trucker of being invoiced. Would you like to share?
Thanks a lot. Yeah, well, you know, for some BCOs, it's a value-added service that we could perform for them. It's a lot of research. It's a lot of administration. Maybe they don't have the back office and don't want to take that burden on. So I think it depends on the individual situation for a BCO or for a trucker to offer that service. I think you got to look at each situation individually. Dave, can you add anything to that from a former vessel line president? What's your take on that?
Well, I think we've got to break them into two buckets, because there's a different story for detention than there is for demurrage. Demurrage can be extremely dynamic. It is not a static situation. There are changes that happen every minute of every day at a marine terminal, that something was available, then it isn't. It's going to kick in an extra day. It's a lot to micromanage for any party that has to be involved with this. And it is an essential checkbox that has to be checked before they'll release the cargo. So by inserting, you know, a retailer into having to worry about that one checkbox out of all the others that have to be done is essentially probably going to result in even more challenges and more delays in trying to get that out. So I think, as Scott, you alluded to, I think for some, it's going to be something that they would prefer to outsource closer to the source of who's having to actually make the appointments, schedule the appointments, and make sure that everything is flowing as it should. On the detention side, that's a whole nother, that's another story. But essentially, whether you are the direct bill, whether you're being directly invoiced or indirectly invoiced, somebody is looking for some recovery of that per diem where they can for detention. So as a motor carrier, you're kind of guilty till proven innocent in a lot of cases. And whether the motor carrier is the direct involved invoice party or indirect, you still have to provide a level of detail and support to your ultimate customer who's paying for the drayage, so that if you're not the one so that they can take a case back up to the FMC with all the supporting documentation that's required in order to support any kind of a recovery claim that they would need to get against that particular ocean carrier.
Dave, don't you, I understand from many people believing that the trucker has the least amount of leverage to defend itself versus the ocean carrier. In other words, the ocean carrier may be a little less eager to face a BCO whose business it wants with some detention demurrage charges without proper justification for them. I mean, willy-nilly, as opposed to a trucker that, you know, well, a trucker doesn't pay and you question it, you know, you're locked out and, you know, leave you out. So that's one aspect. And the other one is on the demurrage, absolutely understand that the trucker has perhaps the best visibility. That's not to say that the carrier shouldn't be ultimately holding the customer, its own customer, liable to pay whatever the carrier thinks they should pay for the recovery, the per diem. And it's perfectly fine for that customer to use the trucker, hire the trucker, pay the trucker to do all the work to justify, but should not hold the trucker ultimately liable to pay it. That's the difference.
And I completely agree with that, Peter, 100%. You know, because the motor carrier gets really split between those two parties. And that's why that was kind of my comment of guilty till proven innocent.
Yeah.
Both either to an ocean carrier or ultimately to a shipper or consignee, a direct BCO, importer or exporter. You know, either way, it's got to be justified on what happened. Was there a lockout and there was no empty returns that day? So it extended the amount of detention by an extra day. And then the very next day, they're receiving that type of equipment again. But does that mean that now you've got 2 days of work that has to be done in one day? Because that one day is open, doesn't necessarily mean that you can recover everything that should have been done yesterday and today at the same time. You can't flex the supply chain to that degree. And that's where it starts to get really tricky. So it does require a heightened level of transparency, communication, but I completely agree the motor carrier should not be the one that's held hostage then, locked out of a terminal because of a per diem or demurrage that's outstanding between parties that they're not even contractually obligated to.
Right. So Knit League lawyer said, well, wait a second, the trucker does have a contractual relationship with the ocean carrier or the terminal operator. I said, how's that? The UIIA, they said that creates a contractual relationship. I would say that it doesn't create a voluntary contractual relationship. I don't think truckers generally think that the UIA is something that they believe is a fairly negotiated arrangement between themselves and the railroad and the carrier.
Okay, so let me just see. One of the issues that you raised, Peter, was about the changing relationship of freight forwarders and customs brokers and the concerns that are out there. Evie, do you want to comment on that?
I think Evie heard this.
Sorry, Stas, I was answering an email at the time. What was the question again?
So Peter had discussed early on that Maersk and some of the other carriers are going into the end-to-end business of providing logistics services, and that could be a possible threat to freight forwarders and customs brokers. Is that a concern that you have?
That concern has hovered over us brokers for a long time, and we continue to have dialogue with customs and agencies about the whole thing about customs business. And basically, Peter updated us on some of this, and we've sounded alarms in the past of just carriers now using their profits to not just get into our business, but into the terminal business and everything else. They want a one-stop shop. Yeah, it is a threat, and it really is a concern that one entity that does not have BCOs and all of us interests in line with what's the best for all. Yeah, I mean, it's really the same thing with the whole thing about chassis. First, they don't want to deal with chassis, but they really still have control over chassis. It's about control.
Very good. Okay, Evie, thank you very much for that. Now, I just want to say one thing. Mike Chapman, I'm sorry I didn't introduce you, and Roel Dumans, I'm sorry I didn't introduce both of you. I regret that, and we will make it up to you next time. I have a question from Darren Shems. Darren, go ahead.
Just bringing back some memories in another life with this chassis situation, working at Pure T down south. I can think on years like 2006. Now, weren't the biggest terminal, but we moved the most cargo in the country. So years like 06, when we had capacity issues, this whole chassis pool situation, I mean, I can remember it vividly, how difficult it was and how it just impacts everything else. We would have, you know, this a la carte heavy lift operation, breaking down Zim, breaking down K-line when you got to do that versus the China shipping, the Yang Ming that you could pull together. And the amount of impact it had on the rest of it, filling up chassis pits. Well, okay, you got truckers coming in, where are they going to put stuff? Oh, now all the reefer spots get filled up, people dropping off chassis there. You're trying to find somewhere to deck the cargo that you can, sending it miles away to the rail yard, and you're already ordering all these extra truckers. So the amount of impact it has, just the labor orders thing on top of it, and you're going through your letters. I mean, it was immense. Just those few gangs that had more cargo going to wheels that you had to make those adjustments for. And I mean, it was easily 15 an hour impact per hook, easily, if you had, you know, more average of chassis on there. And I mean, stuff's got to go somewhere. So it's not just one element of the terminal operations. This is with MTC and the Ports America Group in LA. But I mean, it's a big deal. Stuff's got to go somewhere, and that's it's going to be a catalyst for all sorts of other issues for terminal ops without solving that chassis pool problem.
Very good. Peter, do you want to respond?
Well, my response is, Darren, I'm wondering if you can send me your phone number. I'd like to follow up with you, because that's the sort of input, because nobody, I think, understands this, the box rules as well as a terminal operator does. Actually, it was a number of years ago, there was a terminal operator in Los Angeles, and I said, look, if there's one thing you could change or improve on in the whole supply chain, you know, and he was a terminal operator down there, but he'd also operated terminals on the East Coast and in the middle of the country, rail terminals. And he says the box rules. So the box rule is the one thing that he would do right away if he could. But thank you very much for putting that in, Darren. I'd like to follow up with you because I need to get smarter in this area.
Very good. I'm going to ask for one last question because we're running out of time. Does anybody have a question that they want to raise? Trucking, warehouse related? Going once?
Well, we've got the AGTC annual meeting coming up right in the Pacific Northwest, and I got news for you. We had a meeting once, and we had the president for North America of a global line, and somebody said, how come you don't have enough service into Oakland or Seattle or Portland When are you going to put more service in? And that person says, I don't know what you're talking about. We just added 2 new carriers into Prince Rupert. The 2 new voyages into Prince Rupert. And I thought it was interesting because from their perspective, Prince Rupert, British Columbia, Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, Oakland, all the Pacific Northwest. It's all one place for them. And yet, you know, people who are based closer to those ports don't think of Prince Rupert, British Columbia as part of, you know, Oakland and Portland. So all visibility is local here based on what we're used to.
Very good. Peter, what is the date of your AGTC meeting in June?
June 13 through 16. It'll be in Tacoma again. We couldn't, I love San Francisco. We just couldn't afford it.
Okay, very good.
Can't compete with Meta and Salesforce and so forth. And Ron Brown did a great deal of work looking even in Oakland in places. It's still pretty pricey, but I can't wait to come back.
Well, since Salesforce has largely vacated San Francisco and Meta and Twitter are not far behind, we may find ourselves more competitive both in San Francisco and Oakland before you know it.
All right, we'll be back. Hi, Evie.
Evie, quickly.
Hi, really quick though. I don't think the answer will be really quick. It's less a question than a reminder that the rail negotiation still has to be finalized. And any quick update on that, Peter and Joel?
No, I think it's good. I don't have any new news on that. It's an ongoing crisis. I would say it's more of a crisis than the public is aware, but it's also got all the attention of the White House still. They haven't taken their eyes off, even though Marty Walsh, the head of the Department of Labor, is now going to leave and become the head of the National Hockey League union, a players union. There's still going to be Buttigieg who's focusing on that rail situation.
Peter, real quick follow-up on that. Are your agricultural exporters concerned about their rail service?
Yeah, but, you know, at the same time, you know, the pressure is kind of off as volumes are down, as rail congestion is not what it was. So even though there's uncertainty about the labor situation, the trains are running and there's less cargo going on, less competition to get onto the trains.
Very good. Okay, that's a very good answer. Thank you very much. Guys, we have run way out of time. I just want to remind all my Propeller Club members that your membership is due if you haven't already put in your membership. I want to thank Scott and Dave for your membership renewal and some of the other people who put them in, but everybody else, we do ask that your membership come in. Ron, I thank you very much for your support in Port of San Francisco. We are very grateful to Peter. This has been very, very informative. Anybody who's got a question, I think most of you know how to get a hold of Peter if there's any follow-up. Darren, please contact Peter. And we hope that the AGTC meeting will give us some more clarity about what's going on when we meet in Tacoma. I think the Tacoma location is really great, but I'm prejudiced. I live in Santa Rosa. We have a direct flight to Seattle, and I take a cab and I'm down at the hotel in about 30 minutes. So for me, it works just fine. And thank you very much, Peter, for all of the good work you've been doing, for all of the hard work and the public service over many, many years. We are very grateful for all of your good work. And on that basis,
thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Propeller Club members. And let's hope that we do have a labor agreement sometime soon. And with that good vibe, we will see you next time, and be safe and be well.
Thank you, Stas. Thank you all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.